So first of all, the constitution, as in case of the president, also mandates a vice president. There shall be a vice president. And then the constitution also provides for certain qualifications as to who shall be a vice president. The constitution says that he shall be a citizen of India. He should have completed 35 years of age. And he should be qualified as a member to get elected to the Rajya Sabha. So in case of president, what you have seen, he should be qualified to get elected to the Lok Sabha. But he should be qualified to get elected to the Rajya Sabha. But then the qualifications for to get elected to the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha is the same. It is the same. The only difference is for the Lok Sabha, they should be not less than 25 years of age. In case of Rajya Sabha, they should not be less than 30 years of age. But in this case, the age does not matter because the age here is 35 years of age. So otherwise, whatever qualifications we have seen for the president, it is the same thing. And then he should not hold on to any office of profit in this case also. So what is this office of profit? Can anyone quickly explain me? He should not hold any office of profit. The first question is it defined in the constitution? It is not defined in the constitution. So what is this office of profit? Any post either under the center, state or the local government, by way of which if the salary or a profit is receivable in the first place. It is not mandatory that it is immaterial whether they actually receive it or not. This is what has been held by the Supreme Court in the Jaya Bachchan case. So the same thing will apply here also. But however, there are certain posts which may not fall within the concept of office of profit when it comes to election of the vice president. The same exceptions what you have seen in case of the president. For what are the exceptions in case of the president? The president, vice president, the governors of the state, ministers, union or the center. So similarly, in case of vice president also, all these people, they don't have to resign from their job. Being in their job, they can apply for or they can contest the election. Okay. And with regard to the president, vice president election rules, apart from what is given in the constitution, certain things are also given in the rules, president, vice president election rules. Therefore, someone to contest election of the president, I said certain number of proposers and certain number of seconders. How many proposers and seconders? 50 proposers and 50 seconders from the electoral college. So for the vice president, it is 20 proposers and 20 seconders. Okay. So try to remember all these things. Maybe they can ask you these things in the prelims only. Okay. So it's almost same. Wherever there's an exception, so this is different. This is different. So there it is Lok Sabha, here it is Rajya Sabha, otherwise everything is the same. So come to the next topic. I think all these things are covered in the handouts. Okay, handout will be given tomorrow, but you will have it in the handouts. Okay. So write down the next thing, that is the conditions. The next is the conditions of the office. If you see the conditions of the office of the vice president, the condition is, so what is the difference between qualification and condition? What is it we have learned? Qualification is at the time of contesting the election and condition is after getting elected. So what is the condition to the office of the vice president? He should not be a member of either house of the parliament. That means, can a member of parliament contest the election to the office of the vice president? Yes or no? This is exactly the same question I asked in case of the president also. Yes or no? How many of you say no? Please raise your hand. No? How many of you say yes? Okay, so the same question I asked and the same explanation that I gave then also, now also I will give it. So a member of parliament can contest the election because a member of parliament is not an office of profit. Because I said that what is office of profit? Any office either under the center, state or the local authorities, which is basically coming under the executives. But a member of parliament is part of the legislature. So although they may take a salary, they are not coming under the office of profit because they are a legislative post. So a member of parliament can contest election being a member of parliament. But if they get elected, then they cannot hold that office. That is what is the condition is saying. Okay. So the same explanation I gave then also. And apart from that, they should not hold on to any office of profit, which means apart from the post of vice president, they should not hold on to any of the other office of profit. And then the vice president salary and allowances may be determined by a law made by the parliament. Okay, so all these things are the conditions of the office. Now come to the next thing, that is the election of the vice president. If you read in combination, it becomes easier. The election of the vice president. In case of election of the president, is it a direct election or an indirect election? Indirect election. So here also it is indirect election. What are the other principles that is followed in case of vice president? In case of president, it is an indirect election by means of proportional representation, and the election is by single transferable voting system. The same principle is followed in case of the vice president also. So what is the principle in case of the vice president? Indirect election, and it is by proportional representation by means of single transferable vote, and the voting is by secret ballot. So whatever explanation I have, it is the same thing. They're not going to give any other thing because an elaborate formula and all those things is not given for the vice president. It is only given for the president. Just remember the principle. But one thing that you have to keep in your mind, what is little different is that what is the electoral college when it comes to the election of the president? What is the electoral college in case of the president? Yes, Riya, what is the electoral college? The elected members of both houses of the parliament, the elected members of the legislative assemblies of all the states, and the elected members of the legislative assembly of National Capital Territory of Delhi and Puducherry. But the electoral college in case of the vice president is little different. The electoral college of the vice president is only the members of both the houses of the parliament. So here they are not making any distinction between elected and nominated. It is the members of both the houses of the parliament. In fact, a question was asked in the Constituent Assembly, why the members of both houses of the parliament? The Constituent Assembly said that already the representation is so less, so let us not make a distinction between the elected and the nominated members. So who is part of the electoral college? Members of both the houses of the parliament. So this is one thing that you have to keep in your mind. And in case if there's any election dispute, in case of the president, who can entertain the petition with regard to the election dispute? The Supreme Court of India. So here also the dispute may be raised only in the Supreme Court of India. But the Constitution makes one thing very clear. In case of president, where the dispute can be raised, I am repeating the question again, where it can be raised in the Supreme Court. But the Constitution does not prescribe the ground on which it can be challenged. The Constitution only says that if there is any dispute with regard to the election of the president, it can be challenged in the Supreme Court. But it is not saying what grounds it can be challenged. But it is saying on what grounds it cannot be challenged. That is mentioned in the Constitution. What is the ground on which it cannot be challenged? That the election of both the president as well as the vice president, in both the cases, their election cannot be challenged in a Supreme Court on the ground that the electoral college was vacant at the time of the election of the president. You are a new student? All right. So probably you may not be able to follow because you might have to follow the previous lecture. Maybe you will not be able to follow, but maybe you can have an essence of how the class may be, because we have already learned a lot of things. I'm making a comparison with the present. Okay. So don't mind if you're not able to follow the things. Okay. So with regard to the election of the vice president, so what is the ground it may not be challenged in a court? The Constitution is saying that the election of the vice president cannot be challenged in a court of law on the ground that there is a vacancy in the electoral college. So is the case with the president also. That means, what does it mean that the election of the president or the vice president cannot be challenged in a court of law on the ground that the electoral college was vacant at the time of the election of the president? That means it is not mandatory under the Constitution that the electoral college should always be full. There can be some vacancies in the electoral college, but till at the time the election commission can go for the elections. So nobody can question the Election Commission of India or the election of both the president and the vice president on the ground that, see, at the time of the election of the president or the vice president, some of the members in the electoral college, there was a vacancy. Whether vacancy or no vacancy, at regular intervals, elections has to happen. That is not a ground on which it can be challenged. So again, I am repeating it. The Constitution does not say the ground on which it can be challenged. It is saying what is the ground on which it cannot be challenged. And who can challenge the election? Any candidate who has contested the election, or it has to be supported by certain number of proposers and seconders. Sorry, not the proposers and seconders, or who is part of the electoral college. And any election of the president and the vice president can be challenged in the Supreme Court within a period of 30 days after the declaration of result by the Election Commission of India. Okay, now the next question is, suppose let us assume the election is challenged. be it in case of president or the vice president. The election is challenged today. After 3 months, the Supreme Court of India is declaring the election of the president and the vice president to be invalid. Because the Supreme Court might take some time to dispose that particular petition. After 3 months, or say, let us assume after 6 months, the Election Commission is declaring the election of the president or the vice president to be invalid. So what will happen to all those actions that has been performed by the president or the vice president in the 6 months time or in the 3 months time? Will those actions be valid? Or to put in other words, suppose let us assume the election of the president or the vice president is challenged. The president appoints a judge of a Supreme Court in the meantime. The president has given assent to some of the bills in the meantime, and then the election of the president is declared to be invalid by the Supreme Court. What will happen to those appointments? What will happen to the assent that is given by the president in the meantime? Will they continue to be valid? The Supreme Court has said they will continue to be valid, although the election is declared to be invalid. Same is the case with the vice president, because the vice president is the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha. As a chairperson of Rajya Sabha, he might have done a number of actions. All those actions will be continued to be valid. Only their election is invalid, nothing more. Okay. So this is very, very important. So come to the next point. So other important things. What is the term of the office of the president? We have seen 5 years. So is the term of the vice president as well. The term is 5 years. The president can resign at any time by submitting the resignation to the vice president. The vice president can resign at any time by submitting the resignation to the president. These things are allowed. And the president can also be removed. What is the ground on which the president can be removed? Violation of the constitution. Is it defined in the constitution? It is not defined in the constitution. While the president can be removed only on the grounds of violation of the constitution, there is no ground that is mentioned for the vice president. This is very important. Okay. For the vice president, there is no ground mentioned, but the vice president can also be removed. He can also be removed by a motion that is passed in both the houses of the parliament. Can anyone recollect me the impeachment process for the president of India? So we have seen the process with regard to the removal of the president, that a motion to that effect, a proposal to that effect has to be introduced by a member of parliament in either houses of the parliament. And before doing so, a 14 days prior notice has to be given to the president. And after giving 14 days notice, this motion can be introduced in the either houses. This is the most important point. It can be introduced in either houses. After it is introduced in the house, then there will be a discussion. It will be put to vote. It is passed with special majority, that is not less than 2/3 of the total membership of the house. Then passed in one house, then it goes to the next house. Then when it goes to the next house, then the president has a right to defend himself. And after that, it is put to vote. And if it is passed with the special majority in the second house also, the president stands impeached. A similar process is also given for the vice president, but then there is a difference. In case of the president, it can be introduced in either houses of the parliament, whereas in case of the vice president, such a proposal can be introduced only in the Rajya Sabha, not in the Lok Sabha. Where it can be introduced? Only in the Rajya Sabha. Here also a 14 days notice has to be given, but where it can be introduced? Only in the Rajya Sabha. And in the Rajya Sabha, it has to be passed with the effective majority. What is the majority that is required here? Effective majority. I have already discussed as to what is an effective majority. So who can recollect as to what is an effective majority? How to calculate the effective majority? For the effective majority, first we have to calculate the effective membership. How to calculate the effective membership? Total membership minus vacancies. That will give us the effective membership. And the majority of the effective membership is what is called as the effective majority. Please revise your notes. That is why initially I have given all the majorities. So while for the president, in both the houses, what is required? Special majority, that is not less than 2/3 of the total membership of the house. But here, in case of the vice president, the majority that is required is effective majority. Effective majority in case of Rajya Sabha. And then after it is passed in the Rajya Sabha, it goes to the Lok Sabha. And in the Lok Sabha, what majority is required? In the Lok Sabha, simple majority is required. So there are different majorities in different houses. And once it is passed by both the houses, then the vice president stands impeached. Okay. So take down a small paragraph here because there's a difference here. So take down a small paragraph. Process for removal of the vice president. Process for removal of the vice president. According to the Constitution of India, according to the Constitution of India, the vice president may be removed. The vice president may be removed by a resolution passed in the Rajya Sabha, by a resolution passed in the Rajya Sabha by a majority of the then members, within bracket you can write effective majority. The then members means is nothing but effective majority, because the expression that is given in the Constitution is the then members. That means the total members minus vacancies. Okay. So the then members, effective majority, a resolution passed by effective majority in the Rajya Sabha and accepted by Lok Sabha. See, the Constitution is saying the Vice President of India can be removed by a resolution passed by the then members, which means effective majority, and accepted by Lok Sabha. Which means for the Lok Sabha, they are not giving any specific majority. And if you look into the Constitution, there are certain general provisions in the Constitution. Under Article 100 of the Constitution, it is saying that whenever the specific majority is not mentioned for any purpose, then the default majority you'll have to take into account is simple majority. So that means in Rajya Sabha, they're prescribing a specific majority, and for Lok Sabha, they're not saying any specific majority. So automatically, what would be the default majority? Simple majority. Okay. Simple majority. So this is the procedure it is given. So write down one more line. It is to be noted. It is to be noted. It is to be noted. While the proposal for the removal of the president, it is to be noted, while the proposal for the removal of the president can be introduced in either houses of the parliament, while the proposal for removal of the president can be introduced in either houses of the parliament, in case of vice president, it can be introduced only in the Rajya Sabha. It can be introduced only in the Rajya Sabha. Next paragraph you can write. It can be introduced only in the Rajya Sabha. In case of president, the proposal to remove in case of president, the proposal to remove him, has to be passed with special majority in both the houses. It has to be passed with special majority in both the houses. That is not less than 2/3 of the total membership of the house. It has to be passed with special majority in both the houses. That is not less than 2/3 of the total membership of the house. Whereas in case of vice president, it has to be passed with effective majority in case of Rajya Sabha. Whereas in case of vice president, it has to be passed with effective majority in case of Rajya Sabha, and effective majority in case of Rajya Sabha and simple majority in case of Lok Sabha. Is that clear? So these differences may be asked in the prelims examination. And what about the president? Is the president allowed for re-election? Is there any fixed term for the president? Fixed term is there, 5-year term is there. But is there any fixed thing in the constitution with regard to the number of terms? No, same is the case for the vice president also. The vice president also can contest the election again. Okay. So come to the last part, which we'll quickly run through. We'll complete the vice president today. So come to the next thing, that is the vacancy to the office of the vice president. So it is almost similar to that of the president. What are the grounds on which the vacancy can arise to the president, office of the president? First is expiry of the term, then by death, resignation, removal by impeachment or otherwise. What is the example of otherwise? If the Supreme Court is invalidating the election of the president. So similarly, on the same 5 grounds, there can be expiry of the term of the office of the vice president as well. Okay, now try to understand it. Now, except for this particular case, when the vacancy is going to arise because of the expiry of his term, in this case, who will become the vice president? If the vacancy is going to arise because of the expiry of the term of the incumbent vice president, who will become the next vice president? The new vice president has to be elected even before the expiry of the term. The new vice president has to be elected. Today, who is the vice president of India? Mr. Jagdeep Dhankhar. His term will come to an end. So before his term is getting over, even before that, the new vice president has to be elected. Okay, that is what the constitution is saying. Okay, but in other cases, suddenly the vice president may resign, removal may be removed as per the process we have seen. Suddenly the vice president may die, or the election of vice president is declared to be invalid by the election by the Supreme Court of India. In all these cases, then what will happen? Who will become the vice president? In all these cases, what will happen? Or when the vice president has to be elected? In all these cases, the vice president has to be elected. Not before that, because nobody knows when the vice president may die. So obviously, this will happen first. And then subsequently, you'll have to elect the new vice president. So, but what is the time limit within which the new vice president has to be elected? In case of president, what happens? In all these cases, if there is a vacancy in the office of the president, then the vice president will act as the president of India. Maximum for how much time? Maximum for a period of 6 months. And in the meantime, the new president has to be elected. So what happens in these cases? In case of resignation of the vice president, removal of the vice president, death of the vice president or otherwise, in these cases, who will act as the vice president of India? Who will act as a vice president of India? That's my question. No one will act as a vice president of India. Because the constitution says that there shall always be a president. The constitution does not say there shall always be a vice president. The country can function even without the vice president. The only thing that the constitution says is, so don't think that somebody will act as a vice president. The vice president is not required. The constitution says that in these cases, the vice president shall be elected as soon as possible, not even 6 months. What is the answer you should know here? The new vice president shall be elected what? Shall be elected as soon as possible. And there's no fixed time limit for this. So the Election Commission of India has to conduct the elections and they have to elect the new vice president as soon as possible. But there can be one question in your mind. Who will perform the duties of the vice president till that point of time? Now, what is the duty of the vice president? The duty of the vice president to act as a chairman of Rajya Sabha. So the only thing is we'll have to find someone to perform the duties of the chairman of Rajya Sabha. So in the meantime, if there's no vice president because of the reasons of resignation, removal, death or otherwise, the deputy chairman of Rajya Sabha will perform the duties of the chairman Rajya Sabha, or he will act as a chairman Rajya Sabha. We do not have any other role. But in the meantime, the new vice president shall be elected as soon as possible. But now come to this particular point. If there is going to be vacancy of the expiry of the term because of, if there is going to be vacancy to the office of the president, vice president, because of the expiry of the term, the new vice president has to be elected. But what if the new vice president is not able to assume the office on the day of expiry of the incumbent vice president? Then what will happen? The outgoing vice president would continue to be the vice president of India till the time the new vice president assumes the office, and there's no time limit for this. Is that clear to all of you? Okay, so don't get confused with regard to all these things. Okay, so finally, before I complete the class, just a couple of minutes. What are the powers and functions of the vice president? In case of president, we have seen enormous functions, but the only function of the vice president of India is to do what? Is to act as the ex officio chairman of Rajya Sabha. What do you mean by ex officio chairman of Rajya Sabha? That means in case of ex officio, a particular person is neither elected nor he is selected by an examination or something. It is by virtue of his office, or it is by virtue of his status, he automatically assumes an office. Someone who is elected as a vice president automatically becomes what? Chairman of Rajya Sabha. So the only function of the chairman Rajya Sabha, so the only function of the vice president is to act as, or is to be the chairman of Rajya Sabha. That is his normal duty. But under certain circumstances, he also discharges the duties of the president. When there is a vacancy to the office of the president, or if there is an absence to the office of the president. This is what is the normal duties of the vice president of India. Is it clear to all of you? So this much you should remember. And comparison between the vice president of India and the vice president of America, which I already done. So can you tell me as to what is the difference between the vice president of India and the vice president of United States of America? The constitution has not given a very significant portion to the vice president of India, but there's a significant portion to the vice president of United States of America. What is the significance here? In case of India, when there is a vacancy to the office of the president, the vice president only acts as a president. For how long? For maximum 6 months. But whereas in United States of America, when the president dies, the vice president becomes a president for the remainder of the term. That is not the case with India. So this is the difference. But if you see the similarity in terms of the vice president of India and the vice president of United States, in both the cases, when the president is there, they are supposed to act as a chairman of the upper house. In case of India, it is Rajya Sabha. There it is called as their Senate. So both will preside over the respective upper houses. Okay. So try to keep all these things in your mind.